This is Vineyard North, Grand Rapids, and today we're in our makeshift food pantry. 8 years ago, our church was going through a crisis. Giving was down, numbers were down, and I was just worried about how to get us back on track. That's when I stumbled on Isaiah 58, where he writes, "If you spend yourselves on behalf of the needy, then the people will rebuild the ancient ruins." And I felt that God was saying, if you're faithful to care for the needs of the poor, you won't have to obsess about church growth. The people I'm bringing will rebuild this place. And today we have a whole set of ministries we refer to as Seeds of Hope, dedicated to exactly that cause. Our staff at the time really didn't know anything about ministry to the poor, so we just did the first thing we could think of. We gave away money, lots of money. In hindsight, we did a lot of things wrong those first few years, but we got one thing right. We got closer to people with real needs. And through a lot of trial and error, we've learned to make a real difference in our community as a relatively small church. And this is how it happened. We started with a food pantry. One of the participants in our leadership class was a mom who'd raised a family and fed a family, and we figured how hard could it be? It wasn't perfect, but it helped us to get closer to more people and see the problems more clearly. And we assume most of our food pantry clients must have spending problems. So we looked around, we found a social worker who'd herself faced bankruptcy, and we tapped her to lead a financial class. It was helpful, but in the end the problems weren't as simple as we'd assumed. We ran into issues like unemployment and underemployment. But again, we looked around the church and we saw that there were people ready and willing to help with interviews and resume writing. At one point, we started to notice that a lot of our cash assistance applicants were spending $200 to $300 a month on cigarettes. There was a time when that might have made me cynical, but we were in too deep. We'd made their problems our problems, and so again, we looked around the church for somebody to help us solve those problems. God always seemed to be bringing the right people at the right time. And on this occasion, it was Steve, a physician, recovering alcoholic, still a smoker. And I said, "Steve, how about doing a smoking cessation campaign for Lent?" The first run was a flop, but 4 years later, Steve runs a weekly recovery program dealing with a variety of issues and support groups. In the beginning, we tried to keep things simple, but the closer we got to real people, the more we saw that we needed creative solutions. For instance, a couple years ago, it became apparent that none of our food pantry clients were dealing with starvation. They were dealing with obesity, which is what happens when you're wondering where your next meal is going to come from. But our highly processed, cheap calorie handouts were just making matters worse. So as usual, we looked around and God was bringing just the right person. This time it was a farmer, John, who happened to own 50 rental homes in a low-income area. And Farmer John became our new food pantry overseer. Last year he decided to plant a community farm garden, which was a bit of a failure. But this year I think we've got it figured out. We're 8 years into this, and it feels like we've mostly stumbled through doing ministry to and with the poor. And yet today we have more volunteers in these ministries than Sunday mornings. We have more people come to the food pantry than our Sunday services. We've fixed more cars than can fit in our parking lot. And we've seen third-generation welfare families break free from the chains of poverty. I think any church can do this. We just have to do what the Vineyard has always done. Get close to the poor, look for the people the Father's bringing, and release them to fail, make a mess, learn, and to keep going.